Time of the year, it's the harvest season, and not just physically for crops, but God, spiritually, this could be a time where God can move in your life and those people's lives, in your family and friends and workplaces that you love so much. And would it be great if we could be wrapped up in a revival? And so, hey, I want to welcome you to something tonight. I want to welcome you to a revival. Anybody excited about that tonight? Anybody excited about that? I sure am. I'm excited that chains can fall off. We don't have to be bound by the chains of sin and of guilt and of shame and our past and our fears and our worries. We can be freed in Jesus. And so tonight we're talking about that. We started Sunday morning. I started here Sunday morning with this idea that revival equals life. Revival equals life. And a lot of people live physically, but they don't fully live spiritually and emotionally. They're not alive. They're dead inside. So we're going after that. We're going after the idea of we can live beyond physically. And the first morning together we talked about what does it mean to live a life that does this? To allow the light of God to shine in and through us to our world so that the world can be changed in and through us because we are a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. We talked a bit about this idea that lasting impact equals eternal light. And last night we came back and talked about this whole idea of revival. That God is a God when it's never too late. For you or for me.
That's right.
And we all could go around the room, we could tell our stories how it was never too late for us. And so I hope you had a chance to go home and digest that a little bit. And I hope you had a chance to talk to some people, some loved ones in your life to say, here's some things. Because I brought some stuff out to you, asked some questions of you, and I hope and I pray that it made you a little uncomfortable. And it made you think about Zacchaeus and how you and I are not much different from Zacchaeus. And how God's asking us to do a lot of things. And what will we do to be desperate enough to go after Jesus, to run after Him, to find Him? My name is David Peacock. If I haven't met you guys yet, I'm from Vermont, so I'm a Yankee. So you notice I'm not from around here. I went to Auburn University. I ran track there. That's how I kind of got down to the southeast. And I love the South a lot. My family lives here. I have two daughters, a 19 and a 16-year-old. And we live across town in Birmingham. And they wish they could have been here with you tonight. One of my daughters is at Auburn, and another one is studying for exams right now. So they couldn't be with you. But I certainly am so excited to be with you. Tonight, this is what we're going to do. We're going to continue our series. We're going to talk about this idea of life and how revival equals life. Now, to start our time together, I need to ask you a little question here. The question is this. Who has ever had a dog as a pet? Who has ever had a dog as a pet, or has a dog right now as a pet? Okay, any dog lovers out there? Okay. Now, here's the next question. Who has ever had a bad dog for a pet? A bad dog, okay? I'm going to raise my hand up with you. Now, I believe that God has a special place in His heart for dogs. You know why? Because dogs' lives are rough. It's a joke. Rough. It's a list. I have two dogs. I have Bichon Frises. They kind of look like poodles. If you watch those little shows where they're jumping over things and the person has them on the leash and they're prancing around like this, they're usually those little dogs like this big and they're really fluffy. They're like a huge white afro on them, right? You can barely see their eyes. There's this little white afro walking around. And so I have these two dogs. One's name is Jack, after my father who's passed away, because he's just so friendly. I mean, people come over and he's like, "Can I be your friend? What's your name? Tell me about your life. I'm going to sit in your lap." He loves people. My other dog's name is Lucy, and she's named after Lucille Ball because she's wacko. She's crazy. She won't walk on her wooden floors, and so she walks backwards just to get to places. And she sees things on the wall, and if they pick her up, and she barks from across the house to pick her up to lift her into the kitchen. She's just out there. But I love my dogs. And so today, actually, before I came over here, I dropped my dogs off at the groomers because they need a haircut. Bichon Frises don't have fur, they have hair, right? And so they're hypoallergenic, which is really good. So if you're allergic to dogs, you can get a Bichon Frise and you won't be allergic to them. But the problem is, they get big and fluffy and hair grows all over their face. They can't see out of their eyes, and so you have to give them haircuts. And here's the wild thing about tonight's message. The crazy thing was, I prepared this message, and my wife set up this appointment for the groomers, and I didn't even know it. And I was going to talk about a past experience that we had. We lived in Nashville, Tennessee, when they got their haircut. Now, they went to this place called The Paw. Let me get the card here. It's called the It's called the Paw Perfect hair cutting salon for dogs. What a crazy name, huh? And so when you get your dogs cut there and groomed there and ribboned there and shampooed there, you get a report card. How they did, okay? Seriously, this had happened in Nashville. And so I have one for Jack and I have one for Lucy. And so I remember dropping them off one day. I always look forward to the report cards, what they're going to say about my dogs. I opened up the report card for Jack. Remember Jack? He's the good one. It says, my groomer says I could use more brushing of my teeth and combing of my hair, okay? And then you can get an A+ all the way down to an F. He got a D. And it says, I'll try harder next time, okay? Rejection. Terrible rejection for my dog. I felt really bad. But Lucy got worse. Lucy's report card says this. My coat was in excellent condition. Excellent condition. So we started off well, but it went downhill real fast. On the other side of the report card, she didn't get an A. She didn't get a B, a C, or a D. She got an F. And it says this, I was a little devil. Acts horrible in the bath and 4 toenails. Total rejection for my little dog here. I felt so bad for Lucy, and I brought him home. And you could just tell Lucy was all upset about the whole thing, and Jack was feeling guilty. Brought him in the house. Now, these are just silly little report cards for pets, for the haircuts. I mean, these are silly and funny, right? About bad dogs. They're just dogs. But as I tell those stories of rejection, some of you are kind of connecting the dots, and you're saying, I can relate. I can relate to those dogs. This whole bad dog syndrome. Charles Solomon, an author and a communicator, said these words. He said, there are 2 kind of people in the world. There are people who have been rejected, and those who have been rejected more. And it seems the longer we live in life, the more we're going to be rejected. The more rejection we're going to feel from people close to us, to strangers, to people of authority, to family members, to friends. And that rejection adds up in our life, and it hurts, and it's difficult. It's difficult. Tonight, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about this whole idea of acceptance. This whole idea of God's acceptance and love for us. And this night could be a huge night for all of you. Because here's the reality for a lot of you. You've experienced great rejection in your life. And it's hurt. And it's been difficult. And it's affected your relationships with people. And it's affected your relationships with God. And so tonight we're going to talk about that. I'm going to give you 3 truths to unpack and take home. I'm going to tell you a story about a buddy of mine I met out in Colorado. And I'm going to talk about his journey of rejection and how he discovered acceptance in his life. And then I'm going to give you an opportunity to receive that acceptance from God. But here's what I'm going to be praying for you guys. That your gut level are honest about where you are and what you've experienced. Or what maybe somebody you've loved experienced. Because there are those 2 kind of people, those who've been rejected and those who've been rejected more. And maybe you've been on the receiving end of rejection. And maybe you've been the one who's been rejecting other people. So we're going to talk about that today. So if you have your Bibles, open up to the Gospel of Luke. We're going to go back in the Gospel of Luke. We were there a little bit yesterday. We're going to dive in that Gospel of Luke. We're going to jump into chapter 7, verses 36. Luke 7, verse 36. Are we on? You're not on? Can you hear me now? Is that a little better? Okay, great. Okay, so Luke 7, verse 36. We pick up the story. Jesus is traveling about the countryside. He is doing amazing things. He's saying amazing things. He's changing lives all around him. Crowds are following him from all over the area. They don't know what he's going to do next. They don't know what he's going to say next. But they want to hear from him more. They want to see him more. They want to touch him. They want to hear his voice. They want him to touch them for healing. And people are following him. And so there's a group of people called the Pharisees, and they didn't like Jesus. They were the religious elite of the day. And they had control over the people. And they had over 600 laws that controlled the people spiritually. It started with one law, which from God in the garden said, don't eat of this fruit. And then God said, well, since you didn't get that one, I'll give you 10. I mean, just 10. And then it grew to over 600.
And it became this law, legalistic, controlling society. And people were missing God along the way. And as I tell this story tonight, I want you to follow 4 very important elements of the story. Whenever you read a story, there's 4 important elements. Number 1, the setting. Number 2, the conflict. Number 3, the climax. And number 4, the resolution. Okay, the resolution. So let's follow the story with those elements in it. Listen to the story. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to eat with him. And he went into the Pharisee's house and took his place at the table. Do you remember yesterday and last night we talked about Zacchaeus? Jesus said, I want to go to your house. Remember we talked about what an intimate place the house is when you go. Well, the Pharisee says, come into my place of intimacy. Come and eat at my house. And it was a trap. Because the Pharisees were continually trying to trap Jesus. To see if he would say something. To see if he would do something. So they could get him in trouble. And eventually kill him. And so one of the Pharisees, we don't know who he was. It doesn't matter. He represented all the Pharisees. All the people apart from God trying to get Jesus. Asked Jesus to eat with him. And of course Jesus knew what was going to happen. He knew what the intention of the people was because he knows our hearts. Do you know that? Do you know that we can try to fake it in front of God, but he knows exactly what's going on in our hearts? Do you know that?
Amen.
I mean, when these guys are up here singing their hearts out, playing the piano, could you see their hearts just bubbling out of Jesus? He knew that. He knows that. And he knows when people are coming at an angle to get God. And these people were right here. And one of these Pharisees asked him to come and eat at his house. That's the setting, okay? And Jesus took his place at the table. The place of a guest. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. Verse 27, and behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner, when she learned that Jesus was reclining at the table at the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of ointment. Now there was a lot of women in the city. It doesn't say a woman inside the city. It says a woman of the city. This was a harlot. This was a prostitute. This was one of the last people the Pharisees wanted in their house. They were unclean. They were vile according to all their 600 laws. There was no hope for these people with God. And they kept far away from these people. They wanted nothing to do with these people. But here's the thing with Jesus. He attracted those people like bugs to a light. Do you remember that? Like bugs to a light. And it made the Pharisees and religious people uneasy. Like a lot of religious people all around the world. When the dirty and the unclean and the people who've been to bad places come and want Jesus. But not Jesus. He loved them. Now, the Gospel of Luke is a wonderful account because it gives a great account of women in the Gospel writings. The most accounts, you have Mary and Elizabeth and Anna and a widow and the one who lost the lost coin. And this harlot and prostitute was a party crasher. And this harlot was desperate like Zacchaeus was, like we talked about last night. And this harlot didn't care. She was desperate for life change. She was dead and empty. And she walked into that Pharisee's house. And can you imagine maybe her co-workers waiting outside looking in the window thinking, I don't have the courage to go in there, but I wish I did. I wish because Jesus is in there. And maybe people were pressing up against the glass, looking in the house, seeing what was going on, pressing their ears. What's going on in there? And this harlot, this prostitute, went in. And the Bible says they were reclining at a table. When we sit at a table, we kind of sit in chairs, erect like this, and the table's high. Back then, the tables were low to the ground. And they actually lied on their bellies, sometimes with their elbows up, and they ate like this, or off to the side. So picture a lower table. They were reclining at the table with their feet behind them, and they were eating. Okay, Jesus took his place, remember that? And standing behind Jesus at his feet, weeping, this is the woman of the city, she began to wet his feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair of her head and kissed his feet and anointed them with ointment. Let's talk about this a little bit. This alabaster flask is a soft stone, and it's from Egypt. And it's holding something very, very significant for us to understand. But before we get there, let's talk about this. The Bible says the harlot's hair was exposed. and it was wiping the feet of Jesus. The tears of the prostitute was falling on Jesus' feet. And the prostitute was taking the ointment and rubbing Jesus' feet. It was not proper for women to have their hair down. A prostitute used the hair to lure men in to get business. She drops her hair, the same method she uses to make her living, and wipes it across the Messiah's feet, with her tears hitting the Messiah's feet, and the same ointment that she rubbed on her body to give her smell, to do her job, she rubbed on the feet of Jesus. And you can picture the Pharisees about to throw up. And Jesus, did he say, "Get away from me, wicked harlot"? No. He let her cry and take her hair, the same hair that lured in men. She said, "I don't want this hair to lure in men anymore. I want to wipe it on your feet. I'm going to cry from the depths of my soul. I'm going to cry so hard. I'm going to dehydrate. There's so much water in my body. I'm going to pour out on you. And the ointment, I don't want to use that ointment anymore. I want to put it on your feet." What a powerful scene. This woman epitomized the life of rejection. Men used her. Women didn't want to be around her. The religious elite kept her far away. She was lonely and sad. Not much different in our world. The sex slavery is unbelievable what's going on in America and all across our world. You see NBA stars going to brothels and almost dying. You see all kinds of things happening. People using people for sex, and this lady was being used for sex. What a sad picture of rejection. But then Jesus came along. And watch what happens. Now when the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this, he said, "I'm so glad you're here. Maybe Jesus can change your life." He didn't say that, did he? He responded like a lot of religious people act when the dirty and unclean come around. He said this. When he saw this, he said to himself, underline those words there, "If this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman, he didn't care about the woman, what sort of woman who was touching him, for she is a sinner." Second time he mentioned it. She's a sinner. And Jesus answering said to him, "Simon, I have something to say to you." You know what's so funny about that? The Bible said this Pharisee spoke to himself in his brain. No one heard him. And Jesus responded to him. Can you imagine Simon going, "How did he know that I was just thinking that..." And people said, "What's going on here?" Jesus is answering his question that he never spoke out loud. Love it. I love when Jesus shows up. And then Jesus says, like he always says, he always tells a parable. He said, "Let me tell you a story." He said there was a certain moneylender who had two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they could not pay, he canceled the debt of both. Now, which one of them will love him more? A riddle. Riddle me this, riddle me that. And there was a silence in the crowd. And Simon answered, the one who was thinking the question. I guess I better answer this question. The one I suppose, he's like, I'm not sure, is this a trick question? The one I suppose for whom he canceled the larger debt. And he said to him, "You have judged rightly, Simon." Simon. Verse 44. Then turning towards the woman. And again, it doesn't matter what her name is. She represents a lot of people. She represents rejection. It doesn't. Some people think she was Mary Magdalene. It doesn't matter. We don't know. But she was a woman. Turning towards the woman, he said to the woman, he said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I entered your house and you gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. And you gave me no kiss, but from the time I came in, she has not ceased to kiss my feet." The same feet that walked around the dusty streets. He had no socks on. They were sandals. They were open shoes. The feet of people were disgusting back then. Disgusting. It'd be like if I were to take one of you and say, "I want one of you to come forward. I want you to take off your shoes. I want you to take off your socks." We'll take a man, because men's feet always smell worse than women. Right, women? Amen. I get biggest amen of the night right there. So I asked one of you men to come forward. Take off your shoe, take off your sock. And they say, "I want one of you women to come forward and start kissing that foot." That's horrible. How could you ask to do something? It was worse back then. Picture the scene. But you didn't do that. And you didn't anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. See, when the guest comes, you're supposed to anoint their head with oil, wash their feet, and give them the seat of honor. But they didn't do that. Why? Because they're trying to trap Jesus. They didn't care about Jesus. They didn't care about the woman. They're playing the game. And this is this, therefore I tell you, her sins, which were many, like that guy who owed a lot of money, they're forgiven. For she loved much, but he who is forgiven little loves little. And maybe you looked at the Pharisees and went, you guys don't get it, do you? She's desperate. And he said to the woman, Jesus said to the woman, and here's the climax of the story right here. Your sins are forgiven. Now this woman didn't say the sinner's prayer, didn't walk an aisle in some kind of church kind of building. All she did was put her hair down and put the ointment on the feet and cry. She didn't say a word. And what did Jesus say? Your sins are forgiven. Because I know your heart. Your actions say everything that your words can't. Verse 49. Then those who were at the table with him began to say among themselves, who is this, even who forgives sins? Now here's the resolution of the story. Okay? The climax to the resolution. And he said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in rejection. Go in peace. Go in peace. Now it's interesting, this word in the Greek, if you study Greek, the New Testament was written in Greek, it's irene, it's where we get our English word irony. Go in irony. And the irony defined is a combination of events that is opposite of what might be expected. Isn't it ironic that she left in peace? A prostitute, forgiven, free, the chains are gone. No more. She can move forward in a moment, in an instant. Everything changed in this woman's life. Amen. Now, what I'd like to do, I want you to remember that story. We're going to go back to that story. And I'm going to give you 3 kind of truths and takeaways. And I'm going to apply the story to some stories that I've experienced in my life. The very first thing that we need to understand and learn from the story is people will reject people. People, they're going to reject people. I remember when I was a boy. When I was a boy, I kind of looked like Mowgli from the Jungle Book. You guys remember the Jungle Book? I had a little skinny body with a huge head, you know, and I had my huge nose, and my body and my head hasn't grown into my nose yet. So my sisters, who were older than me, did often things like older siblings did to their younger sibling. They would put me on the bar stool and they'd spin me around and look at my nose at different profiles and go like this to me. And I just felt so bad. I felt so rejected. Just staring at my nose. I'd be so self-conscious. And then when I didn't see him, I'd go in the bathroom and look, and they'd peek in and go, we got you, David. I just felt so rejected. Now we laugh at that. But in more serious mentions, we can feel rejected in our lives. We read in the story here, the Pharisees rejected the lady. A lot of people rejected the lady. The men who used the lady rejected the lady. She was called this sort of woman. All right, this sort of woman. That's what her name was. We all have names. But she was just that sort of woman. Now, when it comes to rejection, you know this very true. Because with your parents, they were too busy for you. And you weren't like your brother or your sister. And it was like a friend. Your friend. You asked them not to say that very same thing. And they said it. And they betrayed you. And you thought you could count on that friend? And you found out you couldn't. You were betrayed, you were rejected. And they hurt you. In dating, he said, I loved you to me. He said, I said I love you back to him. And then he left. And I felt rejected. And they were just words that were just thrown out there to get what he wanted. Not to be committed. I felt rejected. In marriage, you used to be so in love. You did everything together. You couldn't wait to see each other and talk about your day. And now you're just roommates. And you don't know each other. And the kids are gone, and you kind of look at each other, and you're just kind of going day by day and paying bills and existing and smiling when you get around people, but you don't know each other anymore. You feel almost rejected. Maybe nothing's really happened, or maybe something significant happened, like an affair that you just don't talk about. You just kind of try to put it under the rug, but it still hurts to this day. Maybe it's that job you were downsized from. You feel rejected. Maybe you were sexually abused and no one knows in this room but you and that perpetrator. And you feel rejected. And you don't know what to do. People will reject people. When I was out in Colorado, I was pastoring a church. And I met this guy named Todd. Let me tell you about Todd's story. Todd was probably around 6'5" and 240 pounds. He played college football. Before he got to college, his parents really didn't pay much attention to him. They kind of ignored him. His parents got divorced eventually, and he kind of was split between both parents, going back and forth to the house. He never understood what love really was. And so because of that, he went out and he just used girls physically because it was like a big adventure. He didn't understand what love was and commitment was. And football was his ticket. And so he went to college, and when he got to college, he got injured, and he couldn't play football anymore. The very thing he thought he was gone. He was the rejection of losing the very identity of who he was. It was gone. So he went back to the very thing he knew, just kind of partying and using girls. And then he found this girl he wanted to marry. They lived a very wild, wild life with her. They decided to get married, and on their honeymoon night, the wife said, "We're not going to have sex anymore. We're done." And for the rest of their marriage, it stopped. And he felt rejected physically from his wife. And then eventually he had 2 affairs on his wife to show her who's boss, quote unquote. Todd and his wife got a divorce. And Todd started questioning a lot of things. He started questioning his sexuality. Did he like men or women? He didn't know. He didn't understand. He turned to pornography. He turned to drugs. He turned to alcohol. He struggled. If I'm being direct with you, I'm sorry, but this is life, guys. This is what's going on in our world right now. Okay? He didn't know what was going on in his life. He felt rejected. And every time he turned to these things, from drugs to alcohol to porn, he got more rejection because it never satisfied the deep longing in his heart. He eventually got into a psych ward in the hospital because he lost it. Mentally and emotionally, he lost it. He felt rejected like the bad dog syndrome I mentioned earlier. We're going to pause the story on Todd. We'll come back to Todd a little later. See, people will reject people. Maybe you, a person in here tonight, and you're rejecting someone in this room. It's because of what you're saying or not saying, what you're doing or not doing. I just pray as we move through this service, as we move through this night, you search your hearts with that. Or you've been that person that I mentioned as an example, that you've experienced that rejection. The next thing I want to say to you, the second thing is people will reject God. People will reject God. See, people will reject people, but people will reject God. In the story, the Pharisees rejected Jesus. They didn't give him a kiss. They didn't put oil on him. They didn't put water over his feet. They rejected him. They just wanted to catch him. They just wanted to see if they could find something wrong with him, so they could do something about that problem that they had with him. People will reject God. I've been in ministry for a lot of years. I see it often, that when things happen in a person's life, they reject God. And things like this: tragedy, death, loss of a dream, unanswered prayers. Or how about this? You pray a certain prayer saying, "God, this is the way I want my prayer answered. And unless you answer it this way, I'm not going to love you." Because it's about you. It's not about, "God, whatever you will." It's my way. It's like the Coke machine guy. You put the coin in, you're expecting the Coke to pop on out. That's my request. By tomorrow. Or maybe it wasn't answered in the time frame that you wanted. And people get to that place. Maybe people have, and you're in this place where you have questions and they're not answered. You're a real logical kind of person. And so you reject God because you can't have an answer for that one. I know a lot of people that way. A lot of people that way. Maybe you or someone you know have spent months and years rejecting God. Right? And when all the good things come around in your life, like your health and the blessings and all the wonderful things, you don't acknowledge God. But then when that one bad thing happens, how could God do that to me? You know those kind of people? See, people reject God for all different reasons. All different reasons. And maybe it's a big deal for you to be in this church tonight because you're giving God one more shot. I don't know. And I just want to say I'm glad you're here. And I appreciate your courage to be here. Because the rejection you face is probably very, very difficult for you. And I'm about to explain to you this acceptance that God can give to you if you're just open to it. You see, people are going to reject you. Count on it. The older you get, teenagers, the older you get, it will happen more and more. And if you're a senior adult, you could look back on your life and there's a lot of pain and wounds. I could say a name and your stomach starts to turn. You start to get sick thinking about that situation. In ministry, can I be really transparent with you? The people who have hurt me the most in life has been church leaders, elders, deacons, church leaders, staff members. The people who have hurt me the worst in life have been church leaders. You can attest to that. I'm sure you've talked to a lot of congregations and you've spoken to many pastors about that, sir. And so people have hurt me and they've rejected me. But I go back to the situations and I see there's things going on in their life that made them do that to me. It wasn't even about me. It was about what was going on inside of them. See, people reject God. And then people will reject people. My buddy Todd, he went to the psych ward in the hospital and picked up the story there. And he was released from that. And he was on this journey. But his heart was still really, really hard. And then he started really blaming God. See, up to this point in his life, he didn't even recognize that there was God. Didn't recognize there was God. He didn't even ever go to church. When you go out west and you go to the New England areas where I'm from, there's a lot of people who've never been in church before ever. They think it's stupid. They think religious people are ignorant and dumb. And religious is archaic and fairy tale-ish. They really do believe that. Todd was one of them. And so all this rejection in Todd's life led to greater rejection in his life and greater rejection towards God. He said, if God will do all this stuff to me, why would I want God? Give me a break. Pause on the story of Todd. We'll come back to Todd. People will reject people. People will reject God. And finally, number 3, God will never reject people. Isn't that good? God will never reject people. I have a great story. I used to be a youth pastor. When you're in youth ministry, you try to do very unusual things to grab the attention of youth. So we lived in Fultondale. I was at a church in Fultondale. And we were going to take the kids down to Panama City for a spring break trip. And so my buddy from Auburn, who spoke at retreats, he was going to go down and meet us down there for Auburn. He said, I have an idea. How about if I spend the next 3 months, he was in college still, if I spend the next 3 months and I grow a big beard, okay, and I get some raggedy clothes, and I show up at a gas station, and at a certain time, the bus will pull up, and I'll be there, and I'll look like a homeless person walking around, like a beach bum. And how about if you reach out to me, introduce yourself to me, and you invite me on the bus and bring me down where I need a ride? What do you think about that, David? I said, that sounds like a really good idea. So we're driving down the road. You got the kids in the back and the church sponsors, the adults. We're going to the beach, yeah. Can't wait to meet the speaker. I'm sure he's a fine young man. He said, listen, we got to get some gas here. And the guy driving the van said, well, we have half a tank left here. And I was like, we really need to stop. He said, okay. So he pulls off and gets some gas. He's pumping up. And there's my buddy John walking around. How you doing? Hey. And he's totally out of character. And no, they haven't met him yet. And the kids are like, hey. And the sponsors are like, get that guy away from the kids. Who's this guy right here? And so the guy walks up to me. The guy, John, says, hey man, my name is Billy and I need a ride. Do you mind if you get in your little car there and drive me down the road with your kids? I said, sure. And the sponsors go, ooh. And he gets in the car and he sits in the front seat and no one wants to sit next to him. I sit right next to him, and everybody's like, what are you doing? Who is he? And so we drive down the road a little bit, and he says to the little bus driver, he said, okay, this is good, you can let me out right here, and he gets off, right? And I said, see you, Billy. He goes, see you later. He's walking down the road again. So we leave him, go to the hotel, this little youth retreat place. And we get the kids all unpacked, and we get in our first session, and we had our meal. Everybody's excited. We're playing the music, singing along, and everybody's all excited. Are you guys excited to meet your speaker? Yeah! Adults, are you excited to meet your speaker? Yeah! And so, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet our speaker, Billy! And here comes Billy. Hi. And he took his wig off. He had a wig, and he kind of became who he was. And he talked about this whole idea here. And he said that, you know what? Jesus talks a lot about loving your neighbor as yourself. And he came across some scary people. And we're not advocating for you to be dangerous, picking up strangers. But there's a point here. He said people are going to reject you. and you're going to reject people. But God will never reject you.
Amen.
Amen.
And Jesus showed up on the planet, and he was a stranger. And people rejected him. And people didn't want to be around him. And he started teaching, and it was like, those kids will never, ever, ever forget that. And the power and the message of that. What a great, great story. See, every life matters to God, especially those who've been rejected more. Especially those who've been rejected more. The more you're rejected, the more God's heart goes out to you. And many times he allows us to go to those places and experience those things so that we can be brought closer to him. You say, but God, why have I gone through all of this? Relationally, physically, spiritually. It's because God wants to bring you close to him. And he uses that to bring you close to him. Here's the gospel of Jesus. We've been made in God's image. But sin distorts that image, right? It distorts that image. And we become this rejected bad dog and distant from God. And then God says, you know what, I have an idea. You've gone from one law to over 600 laws, and you can't kind of legislate religion, and you're missing me. So how if I send myself down in the form of a man, live perfectly, die on a cross, because I've had enough of the goats and the lambs being killed. Let's put the Lamb of God on the cross, right? Just one more Lamb of God. And that'll be the final sacrifice. And then you'll see, because he'll raise from the dead. And no one raises from the dead but God. And that's what he did for you and I, to prove his love, his acceptance for us. In Luke 7:48, Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. That's a powerful statement. That's a powerful, powerful statement. In Isaiah 53, verse 3, it says this. Isaiah 53:3. This is a Jewish prophet, right? And he says, he was despised and rejected by men. It's amazing how he was prophesying of the great he, Jesus. Years and years and years and years before, he said he, Jesus, was despised and rejected by people. Rejected by people. He was, but wait a second, this was before it happened. He said he was, past tense, future tense. It doesn't matter. God's timeless. He's eternal. Isn't that beautiful? He was despised, even before it happened. He was despised, rejected by people. He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Are you acquainted with grief because of the rejection in your life? Jesus was too. He understands. He understood. He will understand in the future. Brennan Manning is one of my favorite authors. He wrote Ragamuffin Gospel. You guys have read that before. But he said this, I could more easily contain Niagara Falls in a teacup than I can comprehend the wild, uncontainable love of God.
Amen.
Isn't that great? God's love is so wild, so outrageous. He'll go to such great lengths to reach us with that love. So let's get back to Todd. You're wondering what happened to Todd. Well, I was a pastor in Colorado and I ran across Todd. You can't forget Todd. Todd's a large man. He had a big voice. He had a big presence. And when I met him, I sat him down in my office. And I said, Todd, tell me your story. Where have you been? And he sat down in my office. He was a bad dog. He couldn't even look at me in the eyes. He was so rejected from all the years of rejection. And he shared with me. He said, I don't even know why I'm here because I don't even believe in God. I don't like TV preachers. I don't like regular preachers. And I don't like churches. I said, so why are you here? He says, I don't know. But we started talking. And he told me a story of rejection. And he said, so tell me about this God that you believe in. And I told him about the love of Jesus. And he started to weep. Now, he didn't wipe his hair on my feet. But he started to weep. Now, Todd, weeping? And he was catching himself saying, I don't weep in front of people. I don't cry. This is... And they kept on coming. And he said, I want that Jesus. Can I have that Jesus? Is it too late for me? Can I receive that love? And I said, yeah. And he received that. I remember baptizing him. We put him under the water, and the water almost fell out of the tub. He came in the tub. I remember him and his wife got married. I remember him coming to a place where he wanted to live for Jesus. And they started singing, like you guys were singing up front here. And he started giving his life, all areas of life to God. He was like a childlike faith. And he accepted God's acceptance for his life. See, Todd's no different from you or I. It wasn't too late for him. Did Todd struggle with issues and things in his life? Yeah, he struggled. There were things that he still scratched his head about and he wondered about. I haven't talked to Todd in a lot of years. But the last time I saw him, he was going after Jesus still. He was going after Jesus. He was going out of his way to get to Jesus like the prostitute did. I'm so proud of Todd. See, people are going to reject people, and people are going to reject God, but God's never going to reject you. He may not approve of everything that you and I do. He doesn't. He may say there's a better way, but he won't reject us. Think about the worst thing that you can do in your life, and he still say to you and I love you. Let's start new. I'm still here. I'm not going to leave you. It's like a shadow. Wherever you go, I'm going to go. Nope, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go over here. I'm with you. You can't go over there. I'm going to be with you. He's not going to leave you. And sometimes we don't like that, do we? Because we want him to go away sometimes. Can we be, is it true? Yeah. But he stays with us because he loves us. He stays with us because he loves us. The result of receiving God's acceptance is found in Luke 7:50. We read that earlier. It's the peace, the irony. The irony of it all. We get peace. This prostitute, this woman, whatever her name was, she became peaceful. And that's something that many of you right now don't have is peace. So this is what happens when we experience the acceptance of God. Romans 15:7. I want to read that to you. Romans 15:7. It says this. Therefore, accept one another as Christ has accepted you for the glory of God.
Amen.
I spent way too many of my years being judgmental towards people. And you know the funny thing about it? The things I struggle with the most, I used to be the most judgmental towards other people. Isn't that crazy? The things that I struggle with the most, I was the most judgmental towards other people. I became a Pharisee. And I remember God convicted me. And as a hospital chaplain, I do that for a living during the day. I see some incredible situations. I meet some people that if they walked in this place here, you would be very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. They're very different from me. Their path is very different. I sit down in the psych ward with people. I hear their stories of rejection. I have a chance to get to know them. I work with them. They believe different things than I do. But I have a chance to be peace incarnate and walking around that place. And people going, what's different about you? And for me not to be judgmental towards them. See, we have a choice. We can be like a Pharisee, or we can be like Jesus. See, because the prostitutes are still walking around. Todd is still walking around. Another person like Todd is. They're at your school. They're at your workplace. They're probably driving right now. The car just passed right there. They're everywhere. They're at Tyson's. They're in the projects. They're in the nice homes. They're the big ponds. They're everywhere. That's just a cover. So, the question is, for you and I, will we accept God's acceptance for our lives? What will that look like for us? Now, let me get these report cards back out to you, and then we'll shut this thing down. Remember Jack and Lucy's report card? Let me pull out Jack's report card one more time for you. Here we go. Jack's final report card was, he got a D, actually it's a D minus, excuse me. He got a D minus. I'll try harder next time was his. And he was someone who didn't pass. Lucy, she got an F. Acts horrible in the bath, in her toenails. Bad dog, rejection. God wants to rewrite our report cards.
That's right.
From rejection to acceptance. And that's what it looks like when we give our life to Jesus. Our report card changes. And it doesn't matter what our behavior is. It doesn't matter how good or how bad we are. He accepts us and loves us. And that's the beauty of Christianity. I read somewhere recently on Facebook, it says karma says we get what we deserve. Christianity says Jesus gets what we deserve.
Amen.
Isn't that great? So it's not about this thing, it's all going to catch up with us. And some of it does, I understand. But Jesus takes a lot of it too, because he accepts and loves us. We go from rejection to acceptance. Here's the question for you. Do you want to live a life of rejection? Do you want to live a life of acceptance? The choice is yours. The choice is yours to embrace the acceptance and the love of God, or the choice is yours to live in rejection. It's never too late. Whether you are Todd, whether you're a prostitute, whether you're just a person living here in this area and you look like everybody else, and whatever you have experienced in your past, it's never too late to deal with. We're going after transparency here tonight. We're going after transparency in our revival. And I just want to say, when you experience acceptance from God, you get peace. And this is the very reason you can't sleep at night. This is the very reason why you have a hard time with relationships around you. Because of the rejection. Because of the insecurity. Because of the pain. And the sooner you can deal with this, the better off you will be, and the better off everybody will be in your life. And Jesus is still there. And he's still reclining. He's still lying down. He's still there. He's still waiting for you. He's still in the place that's uncomfortable. He'll go to you. He'll be invited to your place, even if you have bad motives like the Pharisees had. He'll go to you because he loves you and he wants to accept you. Let's close our eyes and bow our heads. We're going to have some music playing as we close out this time together. I don't know where you are right now. I have no idea, but God does. And so with your head bowed and eyes closed, I guess the first starting place, the first thing you need to do of acceptance is accepting Jesus. And the only true test there is if I were to ask you right now, are you 100% sure if you were to die right now, you'd go to heaven? And you say, yeah, David, I prayed that prayer a long time ago, but your life is kind of going in this direction. Like, what just happened over the past 20 years, 30 years? Maybe you want to secure that, make sure you're right with God on that. Or maybe you've never done that. You say, David, I have no idea. I'm scared to death. I feel totally rejected, totally far apart from God. You can do that tonight. Or maybe you're here and you're a Jesus follower, but you've been living more like a Pharisee. Will you have the courage to be honest about that? Please, pretty please. Have a moment to talk to God about how you've rejected some people. A family member, a child, a neighbor, an employee, and you've hurt them really bad by what you've said or what you have not said. And the very thing you need to do when you leave this place tonight is to go over there to their house, to make that call, to send that email, to send the text and say, can we talk? To go to school at second period or to sit at the lunch table with someone else and talk to them. Because everybody's rejecting them, but you're not going to do that. You're going to be a difference maker there. I don't know where you are, but I just want to tell you God's acceptance is available. Right where you are. Jesus, I did my best to kind of communicate what you wanted me to. And I ask that the words would fall upon the hearts of these people, and myself too. I pray for the Christian, that your Holy Spirit would show them exactly what they need to do. To extend acceptance, and to move away from rejection. Jesus, I pray for the person who's not a Christian. They have the courage to accept you for the first time, be totally 100% sure that they're secure in you and receive your acceptance, Jesus, eternal acceptance.